As the state's leading property and casualty insurance trade association, the Wisconsin Insurance Alliance plays a crucial role in safeguarding Wisconsinites. Alliance members provide vital insurance coverage, ensuring financial protection for individuals, businesses, and communities across the state. In times of need, they act as a reliable resource, helping residents recover from unforeseen events. Ultimately, the Wisconsin Insurance Alliance and its members contribute to the resilience and well-being of Wisconsin families and businesses by offering essential protection and support. WisI video of the WisPolitics Madison Luncheon series at the Madison Club is made possible with sponsorship support from the Wisconsin Insurance Alliance.
Okay, hello everyone. Hi everyone, I'm Jeff Maris from WisPolitics.com and today WisBusiness.com for our late September luncheon at the Madison Club. We have a couple more coming up before the election. October 3, here at the Madison Club, we have a panel talking about top issues of concern to women this election year. That's October 3. And then October 29, we have the Madison Mayor Satya Conway Rhodes, to talk about the city referendum, the relationship with city government, and I'm sure somebody will ask her about the rapid transit bus system. So, and I'm sure you all took it here today, right? Because you get a special discount if you take the bus. Okay. And I want to plug our fall election guide. We're taking a break from politics here a little bit today. We're going to talk about policy, but there is this election coming up, and we have our printed guide to the top races in the state, and you can pick those up at the registration desk. I want to make sure I thank our sponsors for this event series. We certainly couldn't do it without them. Walmart, ARP Wisconsin, Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield, Hush Blackwell Strategies. They've been with us from the very beginning. Thank you. And American Family Insurance, Xcel Energy. Also, the Wisconsin Insurance Alliance is the sponsor of the Wisconsin Eye video, and thank you, Wisconsin Eye. And you can see the Wisconsin Eye videos of this and the other luncheons at the Wisconsin Eye site, and we also distribute a link. And today we have a special sponsor who's joining in because of the topic, WAGIT, the Wisconsin Academy of Global Education and Training, Jeff Smoller, right there. So if you have a question on what WAGIT does, but WAGIT is does a lot for youth in Wisconsin and is cooperating with the Packers and other major league teams in Wisconsin on a bridge and build project. And you can talk to Jeff about that or find out about it at the WAGIT site. So today we're talking about AI, which I'll admit that I'm a newbie on the AI front. I've learned a lot from trying to do some homework on this. So I think a lot of you here know a heck of a lot more than me, and all these people know a heck of a lot more than me. But I'm going to try to set the stage for some questions from the audience. Primarily, I'm trying to figure out what's next here, what's coming down the pipeline in terms of legislation or regulation, and how the state role fits with the federal role. But there were two task forces here, and so I've invited the chairs of the two task forces, Amy Pechacek, who's the DWD secretary, and Representative Nate Gustafson, who headed the task force for the speaker. And then we have Nick Myers, who's an AI entrepreneur from Madison. Thank you, Nick. And then we have Dr. Chari from UW-Milwaukee to give us a feel for the academic piece of this. So I just want to start with you, Amy, about talking about what the task force does. And try to keep it brief. Just try to hit the highlights on what you thought the role of the task force was, what you thought the major findings was. Then we'll go to the representative, and then we'll get into some of my questions.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I will try and keep this brief, but I do want to just start by saying it's really important to understand the context of the workforce and the economy when we talk about when these task forces were formed, because it really helps sort of determine the focus and the policy direction. So Wisconsin over the last 2 years has been on an historic economic streak. We have had record low unemployment, record high employment, a record number of jobs, many other records that I could go on, but I have to be brief, that we have been breaking both for our workforce and our economy. And so this has been quite an amazing 2 years, and yet while we are breaking all of these records and have a labor force participation rate that is significantly higher than the national average, we know that the demographic trends of the workforce are working against us, meaning our baby boomers are retiring. I think everybody's heard about this now. We're calling it the silver tsunami. That's the latest and greatest way to talk about our folks that are leaving, which is our big generation. And we've had several generations following the baby boomers that have had low birth rates, right? We've also had, over the last 20 years, more people leave the great state of Wisconsin than come in. That trend did reverse last year. We're excited about that, but we still have a net zero negative in migration looking back over the last 20 years. So you couple these demographics with record high jobs, record low unemployment, and we physically don't have enough bodies to fill every vacant position in the state of Wisconsin. So what a fortuitous time to have this, what economists are dubbing the fourth industrial revolution, and have this technology come that can help augment our work. So we really focus the governor's task force on how can we harness and embrace the power of AI and ensure that we are protecting worker rights and our families and our communities, and also ensuring our businesses can stay competitive in this global marketplace, and make sure that our education systems, our workforce development systems, and all of our policy and government systems are ready to continue moving full speed ahead with our economy. We have a 40-plus page report. We brought some extra copies, so if you haven't read it yet, we have some you can take home. And we have 4 basic areas of recommendations broken out by those categories that I just mentioned: workforce development, economic development, education, and government. And it really talks about ways, again, to keep Wisconsin leading and harnessing this power and moving full speed ahead in a way that provides equity, access, and ethical decision making that's going to keep all of us in a wonderful place of prosperity in our great state.
All right, within the time limit. All right, go ahead, Representative Gustafson.
Well, the worst thing you can do is give a politician a mic. So,
Wait, no, she didn't yield her time, her leftover time to you, though. So be careful.
I know. So I got to be a little bit more brief here. State Representative Nate Gustafson. If we haven't met before, I represent the 55th District, which is Winnebago County now and a little piece of Outagamie County. So outside of Neenah, parts of Oshkosh, kind of by Appleton. So northeast Wisconsin, strong there. As we approach the Speaker's Task Force on Artificial Intelligence, one of the main goals, really being from the People's House, is what is AI? We wanted to educate our constituents. We wanted to find any resource that was within their state or outside our state that was willing to come and discuss what AI was. And ultimately, we walked away having just scratched the surface. And I think that's where conversations like this today are really going to expand. What do we need to do as a state? What is the benefits of AI to our state, whether it's our government entities where we can use AI, or in the latter of what are public or private sector entities doing with AI, and how can we assist in that with any sort of public-private partnerships. So that's really what we looked at. We had multiple industries come across our task force to testify and let us know what their thoughts were. And ultimately, I think we've only just seen the beginning of a lot of the conversation, but the biggest takeaway, I believe, that I wanted to set the tone is AI is not going to be scary. It's actually a fantastic tool. It's a tool. It's not going to replace. I think you used a great word as well. It's going to augment. It's not going to replace. And so how are we augmenting it, and how fast can we augment it? Because, again, the silver tsunami is coming. No offense to most people in the room here, but I am 29. I'm not having enough children. My generation's not having enough children. We need to find a way to supplement that as fast as we physically can. So, thanks.
Okay, I won't take offense at any of that either. Okay. So before we get to the other two panelists, though, I want to, there is also a study committee, a legislative study committee. For those of you not familiar with that, during the summer months when the legislature is doing some other things, there's often these big study committees which set the stage for future legislation. So, Secretary and Representative, what is the role of the study committee and how does it mesh with what you folks did?
Yeah, so our task force was the first out the gate, and so we have already done a lot of the legwork, and much like the Speaker's task force, we had brought together leaders from the tech industry, from private sector, from education, from government, and we also really focused a lot on industries that are economic drivers for the state of Wisconsin, because as we all know, AI is literally going to impact every occupation, every industry around the world. And of course, we wanted to tailor our recommendations and our policies for our specific workforce, our government, our educational institutions, and our businesses here. And so those recommendations were put together, and my understanding is that the study committee is reviewing many of those recommendations through their additional inquiries, and I believe looking at the other task force documents as well, and kind of doing an overall assessment. But we know that many folks from the governor's task force are participating in the study committee by attending meetings, by speaking, and I think much like the Speaker's task force, there's a lot of overlap in terms of the technological leaders and private sector leaders and education leaders that are all coming together as thought partners to really make sure that we are considering this technology and our policies in a positive way and in a way that's going to move us all forward.
Yeah, and I would say, especially with the Speaker's task force, again, as I mentioned before, we scratched the surface. It was kind of just setting the tone of, here's the conversations that we've been having. Let's continue these conversations. There were a few opportunities where we tried to approach plugging any sort of gaps that we saw. There was Act 224 that was signed into law regarding AI-generated images of children that obviously are lewd, and we would not want that out as something without any sort of repercussion. So we did have some immediate response, and we were glad that the governor signed that. But then there were some other bills that we had either supported or had looked to continue to push, maybe around data privacy, which was actually part of this conversation as well. I think as we continue to move forward, data privacy is going to be a much, much bigger factor when we talk about AI. And the federal government is not making a lot of headway on that. So unfortunately, I think the state is going to have to step up on that coming into the next session.
Okay, let me go now to Kaushal Chari. He's the dean at the Sheldon Lubar College of Business at UW-M. So thank you, Doctor, for being here. So, I mean, you've been watching what's been going on here at the state level, and I'm wondering what you think is the role of the state. You know, like you pointed out to me in an email, not all these recommendations require legislation or regulation. So I'm just wondering, what do you think is the proper role of government here, and what's the role of business, and how do the two cooperate on such a expansive thing that's happening here?
Thank you, Jeff, and a very good afternoon to everyone. So the federal government has come up with a blueprint for AI Bill of Rights, and they have like 5 different items there, like safety, like algorithmic discrimination, etc., etc. So I think it's incumbent on any government to kind of address issues that have a direct bearing on the safety and wellness of the citizens of that state. So in this case, in the world of AI, the first big issue is actually safety. The AI systems are still hallucinating. That is, they are not very accurate. And therefore, we should not be deploying them in critical applications, healthcare or transportation, etc. And because they are not perfect yet. So I think there's a role of the government there to do something about regulating where AI can be used and where it cannot be used. So that's one role. Then also along the safety issue, what's happening is that AI is now in the hands of children. You know, Snapchat has a chatbot, AI-based chatbot that even kids can use, and there are no guardrails. And it could lead to, the chatbot can enter into inappropriate conversations with kids, and there's no way to control that other than parental supervision. So I think there has to be some kind of an oversight by the government to make sure that we prevent such cases. Second is basically fairness issue, algorithmic discrimination, as they say, different sets of people treated differently by the system. So that's another area where I think the government should intervene and try to come up with some regulation to support, to not allow this kind of things to happen. And I'll give you one example. Amazon was having a recruitment system, and it so happened that they had to discard that because the system was developed with a non-representative sample. There were a lot more male samples there instead of female samples, and so the female population was at a disadvantage. So they had to abandon that. So we have to also look at the biases and the fairness issue that arises because of biases in the system, and I think there's a role for the government to play there. The third is privacy and copyright issue. Consumers should have the right, citizens should have the right as to how the data should be treated, and some regulation there to kind of guard the unauthorized use of data would be very helpful. So that is very important. And then all these large language models, which are at the heart of generative AI, are trained on massive sets of data. And some of the data that is used can infringe on the copyright of authors, publishers, artists, creative people. And there is no protection available, at least in the state of Wisconsin, to my understanding, for that. I may be wrong, but that is another area. And the final area is, fraud. Fraud is a very big thing right now, with deep fake images and voices and videos floating around. In fact, OpenAI that produced ChatGPT, they can clone somebody's voice after being trained with just 15 seconds of a voice clip. And so there's a lot of opportunities for impersonation and things like that. And so that has to be also handled. So these are the issues, I think, where the government can play an important role.
Okay, let's go to Nick now. Nick, I should mention your company because I think that when people look at you, they'll understand why it's called RedFox AI.
Nothing to do with the red hair, folks.
Okay. Anyway, so you're the main reason I'm having this panel because...
Feel honored, Jeff. Thank you.
No, but so, you're part of the future of AI in Wisconsin and, the world. And I wonder how you view when government's doing task forces and people are talking about regulation and legislation, does that make you feel uneasy? Does that make you feel good, as an entrepreneur?
No, that's a great question. And real quick again, Nick Myers, I'm the co-founder of RedFox AI here in town. We're a startup that I like to tell folks has been working in the AI space since before it was cool and anybody cared. So it's great that everybody is asking questions now, but we operate actually in the healthcare space with our specific AI platform. And to the point that the dean here made, right, is that a lot of these newer artificial intelligence models are giving out incorrect information, right? So us being in the healthcare space, we have to be very careful, especially with the specific technology that we use in AI, to make sure that it doesn't go off the rails. But that's a conversation over many drinks at a bar somewhere. But to answer your question, Jeff, so as an entrepreneur and seeing the transformation really with this technology since we entered the space in 2017, I mean, has been extraordinary. The voice clip example, you know, I like to tell folks, although it seems like a lot of this is new and it's in our faces all of a sudden, this stuff has been around for so long, we've just never heard about it. You know, the initial concept of AI goes back to like science fiction in the 1930s. Then you had the paper published by Alan Turing in the 1950s about can machines think? And then you had a meeting of the minds of researchers from all over the country that actually coined the term AI in the 60s, and it kind of goes on. So this isn't new stuff, but we finally reached that point with computing power, right, where we can do incredible things with large language models and the AI as we're all familiar with it today. So as an entrepreneur working in the space and seeing how it evolves, I'll admit I'm a bit of a policy guy. I do like government as well. But I'm insanely pro-regulation with this technology. You know, it's interesting because we all collectively went through the age of social media. You know, we saw the internet come about, oh, it's cool to throw blogs and search engines and everything on the internet, and then we got Facebook and we're like, oh, cool, I can connect with anybody and share pictures and all sorts of information. Well, that came about in an age where there wasn't any government regulation. It was more or less a free-for-all, which is why we are now in this unfortunate situation where you, I, and everybody else in the world has no real claim to their data. Right, and that's been a problem really since day one, but we didn't know at the time how to regulate it, and that is what has led us to this spot. So that's social media, and we saw what happens when nefarious actors enter social media and cause problems, right? We cannot let that happen with this technology. This technology is so beyond life-changing for everybody in this room, our children, our children's children, and generations to come. We have to regulate it. So I think the work that the Secretary and the Representative have done to date is amazing, right? We need to take a first step, and that has been done. But there is so much more that needs to be done, right? Which is why conversations like these are important. I'm hopeful that the more states get together and do work like this, we can actually get the federal government to act on regulation and policy that is balanced and smart. That's my dream. But I am insanely pro-regulation on this, and it needs to happen far sooner than later, or we will run into some serious problems.
Okay, well, what area would you like to see state government tackle in the coming cycle? You know, the 2-year legislative session, 2-year budget cycle. What, like, if you had to pick a couple things like, this is what we really need, this is what the state can do, and maybe be a model for other states?
No, great question. So having read the task force report, which was fantastic, I encourage everybody in this room to read it. They listed a lot of different policy proposals, right, that could be taken to the state, of course, and implemented. I think the representative spoke to data privacy. And data privacy is the most foundational thing that we can do. You know, you look at the scope of the United States, and right now it is a patchwork of state legislation. You know, you have California, Illinois, even some obscure states out on the East Coast. I think Colorado. I mean, states are putting this together. We need a comprehensive federal data privacy law, don't get me wrong, but that is one of the first steps that we can take as a state. And I know there is a bill that has been working its way through the legislature there, which gives me a lot of hope. And I think looking at the task force work, you know, they are proposing an Office of Data and Privacy. So I'm really hopeful that that specific initiative at the basic level is something that we can do and maybe coordinate with the legislation that is already going through the Assembly and the State Senate. But we have to protect consumer data privacy first and foremost before we can even begin to tackle some of the larger issues at hand with AI related to safety and et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, Dr. Chari, what's your number one thing you think state government should tackle?
So there are two issues here. One is on the regulation side, and the other one is on the executive branch side. You know, what are some of the things that could be implemented with support from the legislature? So on the legislature side, with regards to regulation, I think we need to have some regulation to prevent fraud. That's going to be a big thing. I know that we have the Speaker's Task Force has quite a few of suggested bills related to child pornography or disclosure of intimate, information. There's also data disclosure as well. But having a more comprehensive, overarching bill to prevent all types of fraud perpetuated by AI would be, I think, should be a top priority, according to me.
Okay, go ahead, Nate.
I kind of want to play on the other side of the coin because I've just heard regulation a lot. And as a conservative or anyone who's a business owner hears regulation, that's going to make your skin crawl. And I'm right there with you. And so I think when we consider any sort of regulation, we need to kind of slow our roll a little bit and let the companies that have been doing this, because I think the good point that you did bring up was about social media and Wild Wild West internet, which is where I grew up, and seeing the downwind effects of this. But I think ultimately we need to realize that these companies know that it was a Wild Wild West. They're taking steps already as it is to try to self-regulate. Last week I was actually down in Chicago with Google talking about this exact issue and all the steps that they're putting in place right now to ensure that their models are trying to avoid the biases or anything that they've already heard they're addressing. So I think before we put the heavy hand of government regulation over them, we're going to continue to let them innovate as we see them acting in good faith to put their own guardrails on before it actually comes to the consumer.
I just want to add, and I will sort of build off all of the themes that I've heard here today, which are extremely important when it comes to wanting to have some guardrails, but not wanting to impede innovation, since there is a global race now to see who can get to sort of the most advanced AI the quickest. And I will just add that I think it's important too, when we talk about putting some of these safety and other protections in place, that we don't focus specifically on the technology, because as we know, the technology is rapidly advancing. It is changing since the start of this meeting till now. It has already advanced. And we know that the legislative process very deliberately is slow and intentional, which is a good thing. But this technology is going to run laps around the legislative process. And instead, I would suggest from a policy perspective, one way to look at this, and this builds a little bit off what the dean said, is trying to put in protections for our people and for our workers so that it protects against the adverse impacts of some of the improper data modeling and uses, those discrimination outputs. We already have lots of protections in place in the state of Wisconsin. It is illegal to not hire somebody due to their race or their age or their religion or their disability. It's also, there's rental protections, leave protections. Those exist already. So I think it's ensuring that we are enforcing those, which the Department of Workforce Development does, and making sure that the regulation and the guardrails extend to the outputs of the technology instead of maybe just focusing on a particular AI piece.
Okay, so let's stay with you, Secretary. So are there going to be things in the governor's budget that pertain to this issue?
So the governor is developing his budget right now. We have briefed him. He followed the task force. He's got the report. I know that there is a lot of conversation about not only how do we ensure privacy, how do we ensure data protection, as one of the recommendations that we've already heard was to have an Office of Data Security at the Department of Administration here in the state of Wisconsin. We're hopeful that that will make it in the governor's final budget, because we do feel that is very important, as we've all heard here today. But I think there are other recommendations as well in terms of policies where we really need to look at legislative funding to keep Wisconsin on the forefront of this economic momentum. Again, going back to all of our record-breaking performances, we want to make sure as these technologies come in and augment all of our industries here and of our workers, that we have things that we would include in the budget as a policy to help small and medium-sized businesses adopt this technology. All of our businesses in the state of Wisconsin are competing in a global marketplace to some extent, one way or another, whether it's a supply chain issue or whatnot. And we know that our largest employers in the state of Wisconsin are already leading the way. I'll give an example, Rockwell. I've toured their their floor. It's amazing. It's all automated. There's lots of AI in use. But we have so many small, medium-sized businesses that are the backbones of our smaller local communities that hire, they've got jobs. We want to ensure that they've got incentives and grant opportunities to adopt this technology. And we also want to make sure our workers, of course, are protected. We've got workers right now that are going to need to upskill to learn these skills. Our youth, which is our future workforce, is going to need to have the skills to be competitive, to keep, again, our economy moving forward. So there are other policies in terms of strategically investing in our workforce, in removing barriers, in removing the digital divide, and ensuring we have digital literacy for every single person in our state, including broadband access to every single person. That are all very important policy considerations when it comes to AI.
Okay, so Representative, how does that sound to you? Or are you preparing legislation beyond that?
Well, again, I think the way that we've been seeing the progression within our state of wanting to regulate, wanting to push, I still am going to stand on the side of we need to slow our roll. There are public-private partnerships, which I have mentioned, which may come in the form of a grant that we want to continue to invest in as a state, because again, I said we are competing on a global scale, but we can't fall behind, obviously, not only our neighbors, let's say neighboring states, but our countries on the other side of the planet that are out competing us. I think right now, though, ultimately, we need to understand that we're not going to spend our way out of this problem. That's a very conservative answer for everyone in the room. We're not going to spend our way out of the problem, but we're also going to need to invest, as I said, the upskilling with certain workers. I understand that as well. But ultimately, I mean, we keep asking the question, too, is are people going to lose their jobs from AI? And that's not going to be the case. Particularly, I think it's going to be more of you're going to lose your job to someone who knows AI, which comes hand in hand with what we were just discussing there. So I think there's going to be still a lot of give and take when it comes to the budget process, so I don't want to speak for the rest of my colleagues, but I will be advocating for some sort of extra push to make sure Wisconsin stays leading on this edge.
Okay, let's talk about the jobs thing, because it's been mentioned several times. I mean, some jobs will be eliminated because of AI, right?
I guess the golden thing I want to put in is when we've been discussing AI, especially in our task force or anywhere else, there's always going to be a human in the loop. And so I don't think we're exactly looking to eliminate people's jobs. We're eliminating the vacancies that we've had. So actually one of the bills that came out of the Speaker's Task Force that I authored was really kind of the first step of looking at, okay, let's say, and I don't mean to pick on, I don't know where Secretary Harith is here, but I don't want to pick on DSPS, but if they're asking for, and I'm Vice Chair of Regulatory License Reform, so this is why it's coming right forefront here, but let's say you're asking for more money to fill positions, and we know that, again, the silver tsunami is coming. What is it going to take that money that maybe you are asking to obviously put aside for workers, and can we put that towards the technology to, again, augment the workers that you do have, and how fast can we do that for you? Because I think that's really the weird oxymoron is fast government. And so as technology advances, how can we help you with that, with the funding that we already have committed to you that maybe hasn't been allocated directly to exactly what we thought it would be. But ultimately, I'm in the camp that I don't think, especially with kind of the population bubble, if you will, or population collapse, I don't think we're going to start seeing this absolute fall off of people losing their jobs because AI is being implemented. I think it's going to just reassure people in their current positions that they're going to have jobs, but with AI.
Okay, yeah, I want everybody to comment on this, but go ahead, Amy.
Yeah, thank you. So through every other prior industrial revolution that we have gone through, there has been a transformation in what type of jobs the humans do, right? And so historically we have seen robots now replace the dull, the dirty, and the dangerous jobs. And
you mean like being a moderator, like I could be replaced?
You're irreplaceable, Jeff.
Oh.
Irreplaceable.
Thank you for saying that.
Yes. So, but we know then what that does often create is higher paying, better, more fulfilling jobs for the actual humans to do. And I'll give an example. I was talking about Rockwell and their amazing automated floor. You know, before they went automated with their production lines, they would have people that would sit and do, like any other manufacturing factory, repetitive tasks all day long. Now they have a machine that can do a repetitive task, twisting, combining two parts all day long. But when that machine breaks, now they have a technician who's a computer science, an engineer, somebody who's been upskilled, who knows that job, but has now come in. They are making more money to do a more fulfilling and higher level type of advanced job. And we're going to continue to see that trend. I mean, I also will just say accountants 40, 50 years ago would write on paper and pen and do all of their calculations and, you know, compute their math. Then we got Excel. Well, now we're going to have advanced data, you know, modeling for actuaries and other things, but you are still going to, as the representative said, need a human who understands not only how to enter and prompt for those modeling outputs, but also to explain what this means to the rest of the insurance executives who need to develop, you know, a policy or an investment strategy around that. So I don't think the robots are taking over the jobs. They are augmenting, and they are going to reduce the dull, the dirty, and the dangerous. The last example I'll give, you know, for law enforcement, right? We used to have humans that would go and have to disarm a suspicious package that might be a bomb. Now you see the robots go, and if the robot blows up, okay, we can replace the robot. We can't replace the human that historically would have to go do that. That's dangerous, but you still have somebody there calling the shots, commanding the law enforcement. So we can make life and work and everything better if we do this right and if we have equitable access and we are protecting our people and our businesses while we go through this revolution.
Okay, Nick, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I truthfully cannot agree more with what the Secretary and the Representative said so far, and especially being an AI entrepreneur and having built an AI software. You know, my co-founder and I came up with this idea back in 2017. We weren't huddled around the campfire going, we're going to eliminate jobs, right? Like that's not why we did this. But what we recognized is that the problem we set out to solve was actually related to a labor issue. There simply wasn't enough people in healthcare, and there still isn't, to ensure that if you ship out a home lab test, it's going to be done properly and that gets returned properly. It can be applied all across the board. So we were actually, in effect, tackling a labor issue with our software, right? Because there simply was not enough people power to meet that. Now, what I will say in addition to that is, as to what the representative said, it truthfully is going to be between those who have a skill set to work with these AI tools and those who do not. And this is going to affect more so, and this is based on the task force report, this is based on several other economic reports, more white-collar professional positions, because those are the more data-intensive and, you know, brain power-based jobs, right? That, of course, computer systems are going to be able to help make a lot easier and augment. So in a way, those folks are going to need to be the ones that really upskill and learn how to work with these tools more effectively. But to the point that everybody has made so far, this will not destroy jobs, but in order to remain competitive in the labor market, you will have to upskill to some degree and learn how to use these tools. And the sooner we can start that, the better.
So I totally agree with the Secretary and the representative here. I just want to give you the example from the IT sector. The job market is very soft right now in the IT sector. All the major technology companies are laying off people. And why is it so? The reason is that earlier we had humans do all the coding, do all the programming. Now we have tools like Copilot and all that can generate a lot of code, AI-based Copilots. So instead of having 5 programmers, perhaps we probably need 2. But there are new jobs created in that technology sector, but more focused on AI-type jobs, where there is still a lot of demand. So if somebody has credentials in AI, has expertise in AI, can find a job, the market is looking for people with that kind of a skill set. But if somebody has some dated skill set, related to programming, that person will find it very hard to get jobs. So in order to be competitive in the marketplace, I think many of the jobs would require individuals to know how to use AI tools. So that's the key in finding jobs and being employed.
All right, let's go to questions from the audience here. So I'm going to come into the audience. Don't grab the mic, though. I keep the mic in my hand. No speeches, just questions.
So my question for you is, if we're not willing to regulate social media, then why should we be regulating AI?
All right, provocative. Hey, wait a minute. Nick, you're the one that said that.
So I do want to preface this by saying, yes, I do, as a business owner working in this space, am pro-regulation on this. But I very much agree with also what the representative said, that there is so much innovation happening at such a quick pace. We can't let that be stifled. So it has to be smart and balanced, which I am still a firm believer can happen in policy, right? And there are still many examples of that. However, why, if we couldn't regulate social media, should we regulate AI? Well, you know, it's one of those lessons learned scenarios, I do believe, because again, as we saw the rise of the internet, we were all on our brand new iPhones chatting with everybody on Facebook and Twitter, and we're caught up in the glitz and glamour of this brand new tool that humans have never had access to before, right? Again, we had to go through the pain of seeing what can happen if this gets in the hands of nefarious actors. So I think being on the business side of it and seeing various examples of AI images being generated that are now affecting the outcome of perception as it relates to X industry, Y industry, even politics, right? That is where, you know, the concern, at least on my end, comes in, and why we need to at least act more quickly on putting in smart and balanced policy as it pertains to regulating AI. Now, I think it's going to take a lot of hard conversations, both actually at the local level, the state level, and the federal level to get that done. But again, I think it comes down to lessons learned, and the media is not shy about putting AI and the nefarious actors at play that we see now in our face every day, which I think is going to bring a greater attention to it just because the public is talking about it more. So that is where I believe we will be able to regulate it, but these conversations have to move beyond where they're currently at, again, in my opinion.
Anybody else want to weigh in on that?
So AI has the potential to create significant fraud, has a lot more potential. I think that is something very different from social media. AI is much more potent in creating fraud, and also can be an agent for discrimination as well. So that's why I think we have to treat AI slightly differently.
Yeah, I'll just build real quick off of that too. I think social media can also create fraud. I mean, how many people have got a friend request from grandma after her account got hacked, and there's another one. So that's where I'm going to start, is they both create fraud, but I do agree that I think AI has a chance of creating a much more potent, believable sense of fraud that we need to definitely be ready to pounce, especially from a legislative perspective, to find a way to obviously close that gap.
Okay, here's a question.
First of all, thank you to the leaders of both task forces that you're attempting to close the knowledge gap and the action gap on an issue that has been around for some time. In light of that, and in light of the speed of the evolution of AI, how will you, going forward, keep up with that? Because we don't want to have another task force 5 years from now that then closes the gap that we've allowed to open in the meantime.
Yeah, if I can just hop on that one really quick. So from a government administration perspective, I just have a very quick and wonderful story to tell you, and it illustrates exactly how we're going to keep up on this, which is, if you all remember the pandemic 4 years ago, there's a little thing called COVID-19, and here in the state of Wisconsin, like every other state in the country, you know, we had to shut down, right? And there was a significant increase in unemployment claims for our unemployment insurance program, right? And so when I got to DWD, I was brought in to kind of tackle this problem. It was 6 months into the pandemic, and when I got into my chair at Jeff 1, right across the street, I did a quick assessment about where we were and found out that the Department of Workforce Development Unemployment Division was administering what would later be $7 billion worth of unemployment claims on a 50-year-old, 50, Nixon-era mainframe. I am talking the black screen with the green blinky cursor where you press the F keys, like Oregon Trail, yeah. And there were only 2 ways that people in the state of Wisconsin, and this is just 2020, this is just 4 years ago, there were only 2 ways that people could send their verification documents to the department. They could either mail them with a stamp, or they could fax them to the department. I got to Jeff one, there was a mountain of paper, people, 24 hours, pulling paper, manually data entry into this system. I couldn't believe it. Now, this is 50-year-old, so this is, I'm not pointing fingers at any administration. This goes back 50 years of administrations in government who had not invested in any technology. And the wonderful way this connects to AI, to get to your point, was we were looking at those systems, the amount of claims in the backlog, which at that time was 770,000. There were people who had been waiting 6 months to just be able to put food on the table, keep a roof over their head. These are just basic payments into an insurance program that they are owed. And I'm like, okay, if we are going to continue to just ramp up with human staff and work through this, we'd still be going through claims right now. And so at that point, I talked to Google, who's actually here in the audience, and we had a conversation, and I said, and this is, again, 4 years ago, before AI was really talked about frequently, but existed, and I said, okay, can you build me an artificially intelligent super adjudicator, if you will, that will teach itself the rules of the unemployment system in the state of Wisconsin, which are complex, and tell me which of these 770,000 claims I should pay and which might not be eligible? And they're like, oh yeah, totally. In a matter of weeks, they developed this AI system that virtually then overnight said, all these folks are eligible, go ahead and pay them. And these folks, we don't think so. So what we did to not discriminate and not give anybody lack of access to due process, we took that pile, gave it to the 1,200 humans that we had ramped up for, and we cleared the backlog in a matter of weeks. Now, at that point, I swore that Wisconsin will never find itself with 50-year-old technology again. So we are now in the last year of our full modernization process. Google is one of the partners at the table, and we are incorporating things like AI to have an efficient administrative system. We also have lots of customer service components that are AI generated, and we are looking at modernization and this technology as an ongoing, not, oh, we did it, spike the football in the end zone, we're done, see you in 50 years, to your point, but something that we have to do continuously every year, and the same thing with legislation to make sure that we are on top of these things and giving the best service to the people and businesses in the state of Wisconsin. Okay. So we love that story because we've gained global recognition for really being one of the only states that has done that and was very innovative out of the box. And guess how many people lost their jobs? No one. So, due to that.
So, rather than having something like AI pop up out of nowhere and we're not ready to react in some way, and because we want to react real quick, we come up with a speaker's task force or the governor's task force or whatever it is. Actually, in my report, I did say, okay, why do we not have a standing committee in the legislature to actually sit here and address this, especially on the assembly side? And I think that's really going to be the first step, is where does this conversation continue? Because it's going to be a continuing conversation. As you said, there's no spiking the football at the end. We did it, we made it, we've done something. It's going to be ongoing. And so having a platform where we can continue to have that conversation and have members, especially in the legislature, involved, I think is going to be the key here. So that's where I called on the speaker to create a standing committee for next session with emerging technologies. So.
Hi. My question is on the regulation front. Is this an issue of needing new policies, new regs, or enforcing the existing ones? So the Amazon example, they fixed the problem because they realized they trained a model poorly. We have HIPAA, we have FERPA. I'm just trying to figure out what's missing in this landscape.
You're spot on. That's exactly what it's at. And that's where I heard from Google. I've heard it from Microsoft as well. I'm hearing from these companies saying, hold on, we know that this has been issues in the past where we haven't had any sort of self-regulating, so they've done rigorous steps to put that self-regulation in. And it really comes down to, again, a lot of legislation that is actually on the books now actually does apply. Maybe there might be a need to comb back over them and make sure either language is expanded to make sure it's all-encompassing of what we're talking about. But really, at the end of the day, again, the regulation isn't isn't absolutely needed right now. Maybe it's clarification of current legislation that we have.
Go ahead, Nick. Do you want to say something?
No, I just want to say I agree because roughly 2 years ago I was part of a task force for the Linux Foundation. We were working on voice technology at the time, generating standards, and I was tasked on the data privacy piece of it. And I can't even tell you how many data privacy policies I went through at Google, Facebook, Microsoft. All very good, all well done, and then you start looking at the state regs, and it's true. There is a lot out there that does just need to be modernized to an extent. Now that was 2 years ago, but you start looking specifically, and I know it's one, we've talked about not necessarily focusing on the technology, but the key difference here is it can self-generate things, right? And that is where a lot of the harm can come in. So you can modernize a lot of these regs, and I think that will happen, but there are specific components that will, again, my opinion, need some additional regulation. I don't mean to talk specific policies or anything, but California, as they always do, has a bill going through right now that is the first AI safety bill of its kind that specifically addresses the large language models. It's called SB 1047. And there's a set of harms in there. I know there's a lot of arguments going on in California right now over that. However, it's good to read and just see what people are talking about because we might see that as things continue to unfold, whether that be through more states or the federal level.
I just want to touch on SB 1047 out of California. One of the things that really is harmful with that piece of legislation, and again, I've been hearing it from the couple entities, and yes, it's definitely want to look into what other states are looking at, but ultimately what that piece of legislation would do is pretty much hold those who create AI accountable for anything that's generated via AI, where let's say you bought a car from Ford and you decided to drive and hit someone with it. Are we going to sue Ford or are we going to sue the person who's driving the car? And so ultimately at the end of the day, we're going to want to make sure that these companies are able to produce some product that is available with a certain guideline. Yeah, it's a very fine line that they're walking, but we want to make sure that they do have some sort of protection from someone weaponizing maybe the AI software or whatever they have that could be used in a nefarious way.
I thought you said it wasn't scary. Okay, go ahead.
So SB 1047, I think, will be vetoed by Governor Newsom. I think that's going to happen. A big focus is on safety. And one of the reasons is that all these large language models, they have what are called emergent behaviors. That is, we don't know how they are going to behave as they are trained more and more. There have been cases where their behavior is very different than what was envisaged or what was planned. So in order to protect that from such emergent behaviors that are not, should be allowed, that's why this legislation is one of the reasons why we have this legislation. And in fact, there has been a survey of 748 machine learning professionals 2 years back, and 50% of them agreed there's a 10% chance that if we don't have control over AI, human beings will be extinct, human race. So that is there. You can do a Google and check that out, but that's another extreme. But I don't support 1047, but people are thinking ahead in states like California.
Okay, I think we can agree not to have the extinction option. Go ahead. All right, go ahead.
Back to the social media topic. One of the big debates amongst macroeconomists right now is about sort of the relatively new finding that over the course of the history of the internet, it's been basically net neutral in terms of the economy, right? It hasn't grown our economy, hasn't shrunk our economy. The internet hasn't really had a positive effect on our economy, and I think people have mentioned social media in particular has had some pretty significant effects on our politics and mental health. There's a whole generation now where mental health disorders are double or triple what they were before, depending on whether you're talking about boys or girls. If we had it to do over again, with all the uncertainties, what should Wisconsin have done differently around social media regulation?
Everybody's rushing to answer this one.
They're the state government. That's right.
You're the guy who said this, Nick. I think you have to take it.
You know, so to apply it, so what I will say, God, my politics, what I will say is I don't think it's super binary as applying it to just what Wisconsin should have done differently. Because you can look across the board at the entirety of the United States and even globally, and everybody took a bit of a different approach to this, or lack thereof. So at least from the perspective of being in this as long as I have, and of course diving into a lot of the research surrounding what went wrong with social media and how we got to this point where data privacy is an issue, nefarious actors enter the space, you know, I think it's very hard to say, and maybe the secretary or the representative has better commentary on this to say, what could have Wisconsin done differently? Maybe we could have had a data privacy bill sooner. Maybe we could have had legislation identifying mental health triggers. Maybe we could have done a lot of things, but I don't think it's super binary when it just comes to what Wisconsin could have done versus the U.S., Europe, South America, Asia, etc.
Okay, here's our labor expert, Dennis Winters, to ask a question.
I don't know if it's about labor or not, but so let's go with the technology. And the technology is moving in leaps and bounds, right, exponentially on AI. So let's take an example in the medical field. At what point do you think that if there's a malpractice suit against the doctor or AI, at what time will AI be deemed more accurate than the physician?
Well, thank you for the question, Dennis. Dennis works at the Department of Workforce Development. Thank you, Dennis. No, it's a wonderful question, and I think I'll just say this, which is I think there's already studies out there that show that AI is more accurate in looking at large data sets and can connect millions and millions and millions of pieces of information and look at those connections to come to a conclusion. And I think at that point, with the ability that these large models have to make all of these connections, it is superior to then what a human can do. However, it goes back to having a human in the loop. If we are going to have an AI make a diagnosis because it's able to look at millions of studies and it knows if this piece of information and this piece of information and this piece of information means this, we still want a human talking to the human and getting the whole set, making sure this fits the actual scenario, and you're not going to be able to take, I think, in terms of human-to-human medical care, humans completely out of the loop. I think you can use AI to make really effective, efficient, and informed decisions, but those decisions on treatment are still going to be between the doctor and the patient based on all information known to them.
So there's developing case law. I mean, case law is developing. I mean, this stuff is just in its early stages.
One last piece of comment I'd like to add to that regarding like who would be liable in that scenario where you have the AI that ultimately might have made a decision, the doctor authorized it, et cetera. Well, there's a funny case, and I can't remember specifically what state it was in, but several years ago there was a burglary, robbery, something happened. Somebody unfortunately lost their life in this, but Amazon Alexa at the time was used as a witness. Why? Because it was in the household and it was recording everything that happened during that break-in. So that was like 5 years ago. So we're now 5 years ahead now, and we have large language models now. So I would say probably sooner than you think.
Okay, so here's a question that was sent in to me in advance of this program, and it sort of goes beyond some of the things we've been talking about there. So I think it's a good question to ask. So data centers pose a unique challenge with respect to energy demand. And of course, to power AI, you need these big data centers. What do Wisconsin policymakers need to do with respect to energy policy so the key sectors are able to unleash the full potential of AI? I know we talked about this when we had the PSC chairwoman here recently. But what about the energy demand? Dr. Chari?
Yes, they are big energy guzzlers, training large models. we're talking a significant increase in the order of magnitude of energy requirements. Earlier on, we were seeing this Bitcoin mining that required a lot of energy, and now this is the new thing. And in fact, We Energies is providing some energy hookup to Microsoft. They're building a huge data center in Racine area, and so there'll be a huge energy requirement. So it's going to take some time that when more research has to be done to find more efficient ways of training these large language models. Right now, the bigger the model, the more accurate it is, but you require a lot of training. And so research is going on. How can we have an effective model that does not require that much data to be trained and that has a lower energy footprint? So it's an emerging area. At this point, we don't have a solution.
I love this question. I don't know how many of you were paying attention to the number one lobbied bill last session within the Assembly and the Senate called Right of First Refusal. This is a bill that ultimately would box out any sort of competitive bidding for the utility companies when it came to building transmission lines into our state. Well, obviously, if you have no sort of competition in the market, you're ultimately going to see some of the biggest entities be able to control pricing with whatever they want to put the price at. Ultimately, I think the solution is not going towards a model like that. I would say opening up the competition in our energy market within our state. Obviously, that's a huge topic still also on a federal level of what that looks like this year, especially with the election year. But ultimately, I think we're going to need to really focus in on how can we promote any sort of competition, have different sources of energy, because it's going to be hand in hand with whether it's a renewable source, whether it's a traditional source. We are going to need a lot of energy, and I mean a lot of it. And so I think ultimately putting any sort of stifling, again, of any sort of competition is going to be just brutal on companies, especially like Microsoft, who just obviously is building the data center in the southern part of the state. That's going to consume a lot of energy. And, that's going to consume energy. If you have an electric car, that's going to consume energy. We have so many new sources as we continue to electrify our society that I think any sort of piece of legislation that comes to stifle any of that needs to be dead on arrival. So.
All right, well, we'll debate the ROFR bill again soon. Okay, well, we just scratched the surface here. Very interesting topic, of course, but our time is up. We try to keep these compact. So consider this a starter conversation. We'll do it again. I want to thank, first of all, the Wisconsin Technology Council, Tom Still, and his organization for helping get the word out on this event. I want to thank our sponsors, Hush Blackwell Strategies, ARP Wisconsin, Waggett, the special sponsor here today, American Family Insurance, the Wisconsin Insurance Alliance, XL Energy, Walmart, and Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield. And of course, thank our panel.
As the state's leading property and casualty insurance trade association, the Wisconsin Insurance Alliance plays a crucial role in safeguarding Wisconsinites. Alliance members provide vital insurance coverage, ensuring financial protection for individuals, businesses, and communities across the state. In times of need, they act as a reliable resource, helping residents recover from unforeseen events. Ultimately, the Wisconsin Insurance Alliance and its members contribute to the resilience and well-being of Wisconsin families and businesses by offering essential protection and support. You have been watching a production of Wisconsin Eye, your unfiltered window into legislative deliberations and public policy programming, where our mission is to provide Wisconsinites an opportunity to access the legislative process and connect with conversations that inform our citizenry. Please consider supporting our mission, and thank you for watching. Wisconsin Eye, policy made public.